I wish there was just one thing that we could scream from the mountaintops that would
Yeah.
wake everyone up and help them to realize that they could get out of their rut. But I think it was honestly just repetitive, positive framing of having abundance, having wealth, hearing over and over people talk about wealth. Some of the content creators that I listen to, they'll use words like rich in like a positive context. Hearing that over and over slowly opened my mind to understanding that an abundant life, a secure life, a wealthy life is not just achievable, but okay. And I really think it was just that exposure over time.
Do you think money takes up more life space than it should? On this show, we discuss with and share stories from artists, authors, entrepreneurs, and advisors about how they mindfully minimize the time and energy spent thinking about money. Join your host, Jonathan Dio, and learn how to put money in its place and get more out of life.
Hey, welcome back. On this episode of the Mindful Money Podcast, I'm chatting with Summer Berlin. Summer is the new Mindful Money course manager. She's taken over for Nicole, who I've worked with for 8-9 years now. So I'm very excited to have Summer on the team. During the interview process, Summer shared with us a basic personal finance booklet she's created to help sort of young people back home. The booklet's going to be available both in a blog post that she wrote for us, and it'll be in the show notes for the show. So go check that out, download it, it's free. Summer received her Bachelor of Science from Evergreen State College in 2020, and her passion for financial literacy was fostered by her own journey from poverty in the rural Midwest. Now, I wanted to introduce Summer to the Mindful Money audience and talk about her experience coming out of poverty, becoming financially literate, and the desire to share that literacy with anyone that wanted it, because the Mindful Money audience hears from me, a professional in this space, and from other folks who did this a long time ago and who teach it. And I thought it'd be kind of refreshing, bordering on inspirational, to talk to someone who's just gone through this process and ask her how she did it and what was interesting about it to her. So Summer, welcome to the Mindful Money Podcast and welcome to the Mindful Money team.
Thank you. I'm so excited to be both places. I'm so honored to be a part of Mindful Money and to be on the team helping you make a difference. It's just amazing.
I think that you actually have the potential to make a bigger difference just because you represent, folks that are actually trying to do this right now. We come from kind of a similar background, but I did this 30 years ago. You're kind of doing it now. So it's kind of cool to have the opportunity to introduce you to folks. And I hope they can take these lessons and you have a lot to share. So I really appreciate you coming on. First,
Thanks.
where'd you grow up and where are you calling in from right now?
I grew up in the Midwest in a tiny farm town in Ohio, and I lived there until I was 18. And then I moved out to the Pacific Northwest for college. So I'm connecting now from Washington State, and I've lived in the beautiful Pacific Northwest for the past 8 or so years.
So growing up in Ohio,
Mm-hmm.
a little farm town, what did you learn about money and entrepreneurship growing up?
Well, my hometown is full of people who work really, really hard. And my dad is an excellent example of that. He's a farmer, he's a trapper, he works all day long. But growing up, I definitely saw my parents and my peers, other families around me, in a perpetual state of lacking. So the money lessons that I learned were implicit. I didn't have a lot of intentional education around money, but I gained a scarcity mindset for sure, one that taught me to, spend my money as soon as I got it because it was just going to disappear if I didn't. So a lot of implicit lessons growing up, just learning kind of an anxiety around money.
I just want to be clear. When you say your dad worked all day long, I don't think you meant like 8 hours a day. I think you meant all day long.
Yeah, he's constantly working, whether it's on, his farm, other people's properties, that he's doing work for them, or he's trapping, or he's doing work around our house, to keep the home warm, chopping wood. There's just so much hard work involved in his existence, other people that I grew up around.
Yeah. I'm wondering if you can point to any like specific experiences that become part of your money story. Parents talking about money, not necessarily the general feel of constant working all the time, but
Mm-hmm.
Arguments about money, no, you can't have that, these kinds of things. And how does that enter your skin?
Yeah, a couple of memories that are specifically associated with money that I have growing up. One is, when I wanted like a snack or to rent a DVD or something like that. The way that I was able to make that happen is by kind of searching under car mats for coins, and trying to like get enough that I could get up to $1 or $1.10 with tax and then see what I could buy at the Dollar General. That was how I kind of like did my shopping. And, in high school, we had these really amazing opportunities to go on trips. My high school was actually pretty great. I had some cool experiences, and one of those was going to march in the marching band in Disney World. And when that was like presented as an opportunity to my class, I just didn't even tell my parents about it. I just told my band director, I'm not going to go. I knew that it was going to be too expensive. And my band director, he's such a great guy. He offered to pay my way. And that's when I finally told my dad, okay, there's this trip and I'm getting this offer to go and I don't know what to do. And my dad said, "Oh, we'll figure it out. We'll pay for it." But before I got that from him, I just didn't even bring it up because I knew in my heart of hearts that it was going to be too expensive. So I had just counted myself out of things like that.
Hmm. You just mentioned sort of growing up in the farm with not a lot of, call it money wisdom,
Right.
shared. You talk about looking for pennies, you're looking for coins, for snacks. How do you think that affects your decision making now as an adult? Like how does that get underneath the skin? And then when you're presented with a challenge or with a financial question, how does that affect the answer to that question?
Well, I definitely had to do a lot of unlearning. And that's what was so important to me about, being exposed to people like you who are online, who are sharing their financial wisdom. I had to learn that money could be a tool and it could allow you to progress. So I had to see it as less of, I have this money, what can I spend it on right now to make my life better today? And more, what can this money do for me long term? That was just a completely new mindset to me. So I feel like I've done a lot of growth in that area. And, I don't really have as much anxiety affecting me today, but it was a long journey to get there.
Hmm. I'm curious, you took this journey in the last 8 years.
Right.
How did you tell the difference between, and I'll put myself in the good guys camp, but there's a lot of good information. There's just a lot of crap out there. How did you
Hmm.
tell the difference and sort of avoid the pitfalls?
That's a great question. I was probably just kind of lucky with who I was first exposed to, because that's a really good point when someone doesn't really have a lot of financial ground to stand on. They are susceptible to bad advice. And the first person that I saw online, her name is Vivian too. Her handle was at Your Rich BFF. And I just happened to actually watch her content and connect with her because that was fun. It was approachable. So that's where I first started to learn, some financial lessons, and it motivated me to learn more. And that's just how my journey started. I got connected with some people who were sharing their wisdom online, and they happened to be sharing some good tips.
Yeah. It bothers me that it's luck, because there's a
Yeah.
lot of stuff that's really not good. And so just to
Hmm.
happen to run into some good stuff in the beginning is, luck
Yeah.
shouldn't be a determining factor.
Yeah, and of course I learned, some lessons the hard way in my own life as well, but yeah, there's a lot of shame that can be felt too. I think there's a lot of financial advice out there that's very shame-based, and that's not the kind of thing that you need when you already have maybe like a scarcity mindset or anxiety or negative mindset around money.
Yeah. I want to poke at this a little bit. It's kind of your over the scarcity mindset. Like you kind of washed it out. Really? I mean, is that I think I still carry it. I come
Yeah.
from a similar background. I think it still infects almost every decision.
Yeah. Well, I think that it takes a lot of work every day to make sure that I don't fall into, a pattern. I have kind of come to enjoy things like budgeting and keeping track, and maybe that does kind of come from a scarcity mindset. I'm realizing now. It's just become more positive for me, I think, instead of like a negative feeling, instead of crying,
Mm.
feeling really afraid about, what I'm going to do, how I'm going to pay for this or that. I feel really inspired and motivated and excited to plan. So
Yeah.
that to me was the biggest transformation that I've felt.
As an adult and working with a peer group, at work, friends around town, do you think you're more concerned about or afraid of financial decisions than peers that didn't grow up in the same kind of situation? Or do you think you've kind of come to par with them?
I think the way that my upbringing really follows me when I'm making financial decisions compared to how other people might be thinking about their financial futures is probably the fact that I have a lot of people to think about. So, my parents, I'm thinking about how I can pay for them and how, entangled I might be with their financial futures. So that is one thing that I think sets me apart from some of my friends and my peers because they might not have to worry about, how their parents are getting by this month and their parents' bills, things like that.
So you actually carry that on yourself.
Yeah, I feel like I have the knowledge at least, if not the capability to handle a lot of my parents' situations. And I know I'm an only child too, so I know a lot of their future is going to be intertwined with my decisions. So it's
Yeah.
definitely something that feels constantly there for me.
Yeah. Have you ever heard the phrase learned helplessness? Like there's research about, folks who grow up with less money sort of just throw up their hands like, oh, there's nothing I can do about it.
Mm.
To your credit, you sought out some information, you sought out a better path. You said, I want to learn about this. I want to be better at this. So was it just the fact that you were in that situation or what was it that sort of inspired the search?
Well, as I said, I kind of happened upon it when I saw
Just
some
luck.
content online, but the more that I learned, the more that I wanted to learn, and I looked up podcasts and things, and it did take years, I think, for me to really
Mm.
feel like, okay, I can implement this in my own life. But the biggest step for me was just realizing that it was possible to take control of your financial future. It took me a while to kind of chew on. But once I knew that, that was like the fire under me that, inspired me to keep learning and keep implementing new things in my life to feel more secure.
You realized it was possible to take control of your financial life.
Exactly.
I'm wondering what the trigger was. What was it that sort of pushed you over the edge? Like I did, it's not possible, it's not possible, it's not possible. And then all of a sudden, oh, it is possible. What
hmm
was that?
I wish there was just one thing that we could scream from the mountaintops that would
Yeah.
wake everyone up and help them to realize that they could get out of their rut. But I think it was honestly just repetitive, positive framing of, having abundance, having wealth. I think in small towns like mine, I often refer to my hometown as like a snow globe. They're so small, and your reality is built around other people like you in your same situation. And I think it can feel as though an abundant life or a wealthy life is completely unachievable or exclusively reserved for others. And if you intrinsically believe that, by dreaming big, you are essentially admitting that you're always going to be unhappy because you want something more than that. And or you think deep down that you're never going to have it. So that's an embarrassing and unsettling thing to project. So in that environment, you don't dare set goals that are too high. And then it becomes kind of like a negative feedback loop because whether you're aware of those blocks or not, they prevent you from making progress towards financial independence. So I think just getting out of that, that snow globe and then hearing over and over people talk about wealth, some of the content creators that I listen to, they'll use words like rich in like a positive context. And just hearing that over and over, it really slowly opened my mind to understanding that an abundant life, a secure life, a wealthy life is not just achievable, but okay. And I really think it was just that exposure over time.
Is there a judgment of people who would seek a secure life, a wealthy life, an abundant life, a judgment of them as bad people? I mean, all they want is money, greedy, those kinds of things? Or is it not that, not a judgment, just a fear?
Yeah, I think people would be afraid of projecting that because in that kind of hardworking, nose to the grindstone environment where everyone's feeling a little scarce, everyone's feeling a little behind, I do think they look at people who want more or who have more, in kind of a negative light. And I wouldn't say it's necessarily their fault for feeling those feelings. I think that they're valid and they're probably just shouldn't be directed at people who are doing better than them. They should be directed at, their circumstances, their situation, collective situation that exists there.
I mean, I can just hear all kinds of potential feedback. I can't. Yeah, you were special. Something you did was enabled it. I have heard often, yeah, Jonathan, you're tall, you're white, you're male. You had all the advantages, and I always
Hmm.
I always bristle at it because yes, I am tall, I'm white, I'm male. I understand those are advantages, but I also didn't have anything, and the thing that I had was parental lesson. Like my parents were like, "Yeah, you can do whatever you want. You just go out there
Hmm.
and you make it happen. You work hard. You get good grades. You do this, and you can make it happen. You can make it." It was like belief.
Hmm.
It doesn't sound like you got the belief, and yet you come out of it, and that impresses me a lot because I know that you sort of had this disbelief that you could do it, and yet you turned that around. And I'm wondering what enabled that to happen. It's not just financial literacy.
Hmm.
There's a motivation, there's a mindset, there's a belief system that changed. How do you change the belief system when somebody just they don't have access to that? They don't have the
Hmm.
encouragement. They don't have someone saying you can do this.
I do think that my parents, they were supportive of me, going after my dreams, moving across the country. I think to them, money was never really tied in with things like that. I think there was a certain ignorance that existed in my
Hmm.
community and the people around me just about money at all. How fundamental it is to certain things that you can do, how fundamental your choices are to whether or not you have money, things like that. I just don't think money was ever really fully connected in the lessons that I learned or in the support that I got because I don't want to say I didn't receive support. I did have supportive parents, but I just don't think money was ever really a part of their wisdom that they were trying to pass down to me, So that's really what was lacking for me. But that's why I wanted to write this little booklet that I wrote. And like the last line in the booklet is just, you do deserve it. I recognize that hearing that people deserve to be in a better place, that they deserve to feel secure and have abundance, that's so important. So I got it from financial literacy content creators online. Wherever someone can get it, that's really important. If they're not receiving it from their family or their friends, you know, I hope that people like you could step in and be the person that shows them that they're worth it by giving them this advice.
Are there resources out there that you would currently recommend for somebody that are just trying to get, launched, get an understanding, trying to become financially literate, trying to be motivated, trying to have that mindset shift?
I mean, I can't not recommend the mindful money courses because specifically in my notes, I have written visualization and affirmation because those are the first important things, visualizing that you can have a better life, telling yourself that you're worth it. And the vision and goals course is just that. So I can't not recommend that. But that's also why I ended up writing this booklet to send back home because even more so, in my opinion, than the little money tips that I have in there and the little, facts about certain financial areas of life. I think just the act of passing that on to someone and saying, here, read this, you are worth it, that was the big deal to me.
Yeah. What do you think the biggest hurdles are for millennials and Gen Z today in terms of their own financial success?
Well, I think that younger generations today definitely have access to more information than other generations have ever had. If you know where to look, you can find some really amazing financial advice online. You could find endless hours of it. But I think the other side of that coin, the problem with it is that there's so much distraction and targeted distraction, targeted advertisements, and targeted algorithms that really show you, people living large or influencer lifestyles where maybe they're getting those things for free, free vacations or whatever, but you're comparing yourself to them. So I think younger generations have kind of fallen into this trap of comparison, being barraged with content online that's specifically trying to kind of harvest their money out of them. I think that's a really big hurdle for younger generations today.
I almost pay attention to no. Like I've never actually logged into TikTok. I'm never
Mm,
on Instagram, so I don't see I don't even know what they're called, shorts or reels or whatever they're called. So that's perhaps I'm naive, but as a percentage, you're there. How much of it is decent? People that have information, and then how much of it is just influencer or product pitch or just sort
mhm.
of self promoting kind of stuff.
Well, the scary thing is everyone's algorithm looks so totally different. So, I can't really speak for the majority because my algorithm is going to be so targeted to me specifically versus
Of
someone
course.
else's algorithm might be completely different. But that's kind of a problem because, if you start off watching, some hauls, some luxury brand hauls, and you're just aspirational and you keep watching that stuff, your entire feed, your entire algorithm is going to be people buying luxury brands, showing off their new outfits, showing off, all of these expensive things. And that's what you're going to think the world is. That's what you're seeing. That's making up most of the content you're consuming. So then you're going to feel a lot of FOMO. You're going to feel a lot of need to buy those things to feel like you're stacking up. And that's, I think, a really big problem that a lot of people experience, not just in ads, but just in the kind of content that they're seeing people's posts.
Yeah, and that goes for how to invest if you happen to grow up in the age of crypto and crypto
Hmm.
is the thing that's on the news and you click on a crypto thing because hey,
Right.
you're curious, and then that's all you get is crypto, 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 crypto after that.
Exactly. And then that's what you think being financially literate is, knowing everything about crypto. Exactly. They become like these echo chambers.
Huh. I'm curious, was your degree in sociology? I mean, you seem to have thought this through quite a bit in a way that I wouldn't imagine someone thinking it through.
No, my degree was in environmental science. Depressingly, I care a lot about environmental science. So, it's not depressing, but it kind of is. But yeah, I just really think a lot about the way that the world is working today. It's getting a lot more complex and a little scarier with each new complexity, in my opinion.
For sure. So I love the short book of money tips. The vast majority of what I teach assumes the very basics, the things you talk about, like checking accounts and credit cards and
Hmm.
car stuff, right? We've got courses that teach these items, but I rarely talk about it.
Hmm.
I love the fact that you sort of hit right on the basics. And it's so important that those of us in the financial world tend to forget or just assume everyone knows these things. So what made you want to write? I know what made you want to write the book, but then you wanted to share it with people back home. What have people said about it? You send it back. Did people give you a comment? Oh, this is really helpful, or this is a stretch, or what do you hear?
I sent the book to my cousin. She's only a little bit younger than me. And I said, would you be interested in this? Because, I was sending it mostly to younger people. And she said, I would pay you for that. So, I have heard people say that it's like, very valuable to them, that they really appreciate me putting it together for their reference. So that's really nice to hear. But I think a lot of the young people that I've given it to, they will need to take their time, using it and experiencing the things that I talk about in there before they probably really, use it in its full capacity. Just like the things that I was exposed to. I'm sure it'll take them learning a couple of their own lessons alongside having that stuff to fully appreciate everything.
Yeah. Have you thought about ever like including a bibliography or, 6 or 8 other people in there that you've read and sort of believe they're worthy of following? Share just, hey, don't take my word for
Right.
it. Here's others that you might want to listen to.
Yeah, I thought about including just a list of, people's accounts, people's books, and things like that, but I haven't put one together yet. I think it's a great idea.
Yeah. What do you think the most important lesson in the book is in the booklet?
Well, you mentioned, how I start off with just the basics. I think for people who are just, getting cash as their paychecks, they're spending it down the corner right after they get it into their hand. Those early chapters about checking accounts and, budgeting, those are going to be the most important. I would be tempted to say that for me, the most important lesson was about credit cards because, as someone who didn't have a lot of knowledge, it's very easy to fall into the trap of credit card debt and to not know how to crawl out of it. So that's very important. But I think honestly, the biggest one for me is probably budgeting because it taught me, like I said before, that your money can work for you, that it doesn't have to be checking out how much you have to see if you can buy that thing. It can be planning ahead for how much you're going to have left over and then putting that money to work for your future. And I'm constantly exercising that skill now, and I'm sure I will for the rest of my life. And that was really the most life-changing thing for me to understand.
Planning. Funny. I mean,
Yeah.
who would have worked it? Like, who would have thought that would work?
hmm
If you were starting all over today, what's the first thing that you think you would do to lead to greater understanding of money and personal finance?
Well, I would start by telling myself, hey, you're worth this. You're worth, accumulating an abundant and secure life. You don't have to worry so much if you can just put a few helpful practices in place. Things can get a lot better because I think starting off, all I knew of money and personal finance was how to be worried about it. So if I could immediately shift my mindset like that, wouldn't that be awesome? I wish that I could just tell myself, to open my eyes and have a more accepting and energetic and motivated mindset about moving forward, making progress.
That first step suggests that mindset is probably the most powerful thing that we have to change the future. You agree with that?
I do honestly believe that. Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. So just before we wrap, what would constitute a perfect day for you?
I guess being outside under the sun and having some ice cream, hanging out with my friends. I have a lot of long distance friends who I love very much. That would be a really perfect day for me.
So I want to say thanks for coming on and sort of just sharing the path and being a little vulnerable with the audience. I really appreciate that. I think that, as you know, one of the goals of Mindful Money is to normalize the conversation. It makes no sense to feel shame about your personal finances and your money
hmm
because, so many people that will never admit it to you have gone through something similar. So we're all in this
Yes,
together. I really appreciate you coming on and sharing your story.
absolutely. Thank you so much.
Thanks for listening. Full show notes for each episode, which includes a summary, key takeaways, quotes, and any resources mentioned, are available at mindful.money. Be sure to follow and subscribe wherever you listen to your favorite podcasts. And if you're enjoying the content and getting value from these episodes, please leave us a rating and review at ratethispodcast.com/mindfulmoney. We'll be sure to read those out on future episodes.